All right, the Single Family Design Board meeting for April 22nd, 2024 has convened. We will start with roll call.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. I'll proceed with roll call. Chair Lewis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Sherry.
Present.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
All right, so our first item is public comment. So if we have any comments for the board as a whole, not for one of the agenda items.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do not have any slips for general public comment. If anyone wishes to do so, they may fill one out and bring it to me. However, I see no one moving to do so, so I will move on to virtual comment. And I don't see any virtual hands raised for public comment, so we did not receive any written correspondence either. At that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Lewis.
Okay, perfect. So next is approval of the minutes from the full board meeting on April 8th. I was not present for that one, but we had one item.
I did review this before, so I'll make a motion to approve. I think Dawn, yeah.
I'll second that motion. Or did you already second it? Okay.
Okay, we will take a vote. Chair Lewis,
Abstain.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Sherry.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, next is approval of the consent calendar draft minutes for April 15th.
Item A, sorry, can I see the address, Ted? I'm filling in for Sebastian today. Item A, 225 Salida del Sol. It received project design approval and final approval with the comments that, one, the applicant to provide a detail for the gable corbel details to extend beyond the fascia to match existing, and the Neighborhood Preservation Ordinance criteria have been met. Item B, that's okay, that mouse, yeah. 1575 Las Canoas Road. It was continued indefinitely to consent with the following comments. One, the project is ready for project design approval and final approval pending receipt and review of all required materials. Two, proposed alterations and additions to property are appropriate and hidden from public views as well as views from neighboring parcels. Three, the mass, bulk, and scale are appropriate as submitted. Item C, 1059 Summit Road. The project received, or it was there for concept review, I believe, and it was continued indefinitely to consent with comments. One, the materiality and heights of the as-built walls, the resurfacing of the tennis court, the hedge material, and the as-built landscaping appear to be aesthetically appropriate for the project. And two, the applicant should return to consent agenda after confirmation of whether the proposed fences and hedges are allowed to be maintained in the easement area as designed. In item D, it was there for concept, 602 APS. It was continued indefinitely to consent for project design approval and final approval with the comments that, one, the proposed enlarged decks and third-story roof height increase on the southwest corner and the proposed material choices are appropriate to the design. Two, the applicants to study the transitions between materials carefully to define the locations and method of joining two materials in the same plane. This occurs between stucco, cementitious siding, and sandstone in varying combinations. Three, the board looks forward to additional detailing of the proposed steel knee bracing, deck framing, and associated connections to the southeast and southwest corners, material transitions, architectural details, and new windows.
I'll make a motion for approval because I was the one present, and I agree with the minutes for the meeting.
All right, second.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Chair Lewis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Sherry.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, and the next is for the consent calendar today.
Yes, thank you. There were two items on today's agenda. Item A was here for final approval, 41 North Ridge Road, and it was continued indefinitely back to consent with the following comments. 1, provide specifications and details for the proposed railing. 2, clarify proposed retaining wall location and material. 3, clearly outline the existing condition of the retaining wall heights on the plan. 4, the applicant to consider vines that would grow up and screen the wall in addition to the proposed lemonade berry and coyote bush if the proposed wall is higher than 5 feet. And 5, provide a cross-section through the proposed site plan from the deck level down to the finished grade at the lowest point of the lowest retaining wall on site. And item B was therefore review after final approval, 222 Mesa Lane, and it received review after final approval with the following comments. 1, the board suggests that the garage door header to be raised 6 inches to minimize the plaster as visually seen from the front elevation between the top of the header to the plate line. And 2, that the project substantially conforms to the plans that received project design approval and final approval on October 31st, 2022.
I have 2 comments on item A. The second comment should read, clarify proposed retaining wall height, comma, location, comma, and material. Or heights with an S, because there's going to be varying heights.
Okay.
And the comment about number 4, the applicant to consider vines that would, instead of saying grow up and screen, I would say, I'm sure I said that, but let's just say, just take out grow up and just say that would screen the wall. And on the item B, if you could just add to number 1, the garage door header to be raised plus or minus 6 inches so that they have an option. And that's it. And I'll make a motion to approve those minutes because I was here.
Second.
Take a vote. Chair Lewis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Sherry.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, our next item is announcements and any requests or future agenda items.
Chair Lewis, staff has a couple announcements. By the way, Ted Hamilton, role of project planner and design review. Helping out is Carly Ernest. She's the ABR staff person. Sebastian Herricks is out sick today. All right, so the first thing I wanted to do is just, this is a general announcement. I'm going around making it all the design review boards. And it's kind of an extension of the clerks training that they did this last summer on basically just meeting decorum. And the intent of that training is to continue to foster an environment of constructive feedback and support for applicants, board members, and staff, and the public. So we want to have these meetings be, collegial, collaborative environments for people to get good feedback on their projects. That's about all I want to say, and just, keep the comments positive and think about the impact of what you're saying, and stay positive, essentially. So that's it for that. We did receive an appeal of the final approval of 1269 Farillo Road. That is tentatively scheduled for Planning Commission on June 6th. That is a tentative schedule. We haven't confirmed with all parties that date works, but that's a tentative date. And I believe that's all from staff.
Is there any update on the open position here and what that looks like schedule-wise?
Thanks for the reminder. I did want to touch on that. So currently, we did receive 3 applicants for the Single Family Design Board as part of the Spring Advisory Board recruitment for the one opening. And the interviews are going to be held starting tomorrow at City Council for a period of 3 weeks, and they're going to be weekly interviews. It's just to allow applicants enough time to hopefully make it to an interview. Anyone interested in applying for the board or who applied, you have to interview. So if any of you are listening, make sure you show up to an interview. And appointments are going to be made hopefully by June 11th, I think is the date that council set for that.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Any other announcements from board members?
I need to announce that I need to recuse myself from item 4 today for a perceived conflict of interest.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to our first item. This is a discussion item for the pre-approved accessory dwelling units and a staff presentation. And I'll read into record that no final appealable decision will take place at this hearing. This is a staff presentation and discussion regarding the city's approach to the implementation of Assembly Bill 1332, which requires local agencies to develop a program for the pre-approval of accessory dwelling unit plans. Staff requests feedback on design parameters and considerations regarding the single-family design board's involvement in the pre-approval process for ADUs under the Assembly Bill 1332. And they did include a staff memo that outlines everything as well. Turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Chair Lewis. Okay, thank you. So good afternoon. Ted Hamilton Roll, already introduced myself. I'm here this afternoon to introduce the city's plans for implementing AB 1332. It's a new state law that requires local agencies to provide a process, at least, for pre-approved accessory dwelling unit plans on their websites for the public to use. The intent of the law is to facilitate housing production by providing an express lane for review and approval of certain ADU applications, and I'm requesting input from each of the boards, so not just this one. Today's presentation will be relatively brief. I just want to get some initial feedback from you all and go back to the working group team. I'll introduce some of the parameters of the pre-reviewed ADU program, show some examples of other jurisdictions that have already implemented the program, describe the city's approach, and request your feedback on the design parameters of what these ADUs should potentially look like. So this state law is fairly exciting for applicants and homeowners. It results in an ADU process that's hopefully cheaper and quicker than the standard ministerial permitting process. So it does this by cutting down on consultant costs and plan review time by having plans that have already been pre-vetted for agencies to review. The law requires that local agencies create a process only, and our goal is to go a step further by opening a call for design entries and have at least one pre-approved plan on the city's website by the end of the year. So we want to go past the level of just providing a process, and we actually want to have a plan on our website at least. This law only applies to detached ADUs, and the city is further limiting the parameters of ADUs to ADUs that are 1 story or a maximum of 16 feet in height and between 400 and 800 square feet. This is consistent with the design parameters of a special ADU, what the city calls a special ADU, which is allowed in most parts of the city, including high fire hazard areas. 9 times out of 10, these small 1-story detached ADUs, subject to this law, would be ministerial, meaning that they match the design style of the primary residence, or if they're at least 20 feet away and not in the front yard, they don't need to match the design style. This program would allow applicants to select a ready-to-go ADU plan that doesn't have to match their primary residence, even if it's within 20 feet or in the front yard. The goal is to end up with some options for applicants and homeowners that would work pretty much everywhere in the city and be compatible with, but not necessarily match, most architectural styles in the city. So here are some examples from other jurisdictions. The County of San Luis Obispo has a couple of modern and farmhouse-style units. You can see the floor plan for each unit is the same. It's just the exterior that's different. So their approach is kind of like taking a cake and decorating it, if you will. Atascadero has a few different styles on their website. They've got ranch style, craftsman style, and then a couple of modern styles down here. The city of Carpinteria, our neighbor, has 2 styles with different options for finish materials per the applicant's preference. So I'll be asking on your, I'll be asking your input if we should implement a certain, a similar method for providing materials options. So for example, you'd pick stucco plus wood windows plus clay roof tiles, and then you'd have kind of a certain design style for your house or for your ADU. The city of LA also has a lot of examples on their website if you're curious. So design review board input is not required as part of program implementation to comply with state law. The city could proceed with implementation without consulting design review boards at all. However, staff recognizes the added value that your input and expertise would bring to the program. Hence, we are seeking your feedback. Your role in today's discussion is to guide staff in an advisory, collaborative role to help set design parameters for these one-story detached ADUs so that they work on most sites and in most situations. You effectively get to be judges in a kind of design competition, not entirely unlike the small house competition that was held back in 1924. So later on this summer, when we return with batch proposals for pre-approved ADU designs, we'll ask you to weigh in on each design, ask questions, provide comments, then take a straw poll on whether you think the design is generally acceptable for use. You won't be formally approving or denying the designs as part of an appealable action, since these ADUs would be ministerial and not subject to your review anyway. And as part of the pre-approval process, you won't be required to make any findings, since the ADUs won't be associated with a formal project application on a site just yet. When we return with a batch of proposals, they'll be scheduled on the agenda as design review consultations with no appealable action, and we'll ask you to evaluate the design's general consistency with applicable guidelines, i.e., is this design a good version of a craftsman bungalow or a Spanish colonial revival cottage? We're looking for your opinion on whether the design would fit within most neighborhoods and with most architectural styles so that it can be pre-approved without having to return to design review as part of the project application. Again, I'll emphasize that as part of a formal approval, instead of a formal approval or denial, we'll be asking you to take a straw poll, basically a thumbs up, thumbs down on the design. A negative straw vote means that the plan does not get vetted by the design review board and does not proceed in the pre-approval process. The applicant can then choose to resubmit a revised design for a new design review consultation at a later date. An affirmative of thumbs up straw vote means that the design can proceed with building code review and get the city's pre-approval for use on the website. Our preference is to have one concept review per project. However, we also want to allow for a second concept review if the design review board thinks it would help produce a successful design. Alternatively, the board or commission could give a conditional straw vote referring review of details to staff. Say if you wanted a different color roof or different, you thought a different window style would make sense. Today we'll be asking for your answers to specific questions, which I'll show in a moment. And then after we compile all the design review board feedback, we'll incorporate it into the submittal requirements for the request for proposals. We're going to be accepting applications from the public on an ongoing basis in the future, but this next phase will just be an open call between May and June. Potentially in the future, we might have set periods, maybe twice a year, where we bring batches of proposals to design review, but the goal is just to get through this first year first and see how it goes, see how many applicants we get. Then once a design gets the design review thumbs up and staff have verified that it meets code, we'll post all the successful designs on the city's website. Okay, so that concludes my presentation. Before we move into questions, we'll turn it over to you, Chair Lewis, for public comment.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Chair Lewis. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I have no slips for this particular item. However, if you wish to make a comment, please fill a slip out and bring it to me. I will then move on to virtual comment, and at this time, I see no hands raised for this item on virtual comment, and we did not receive any written correspondence regarding this item. So at that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Lewis.
All right, thank you. And so if we start with questions, does anyone, I've got some questions, but does anyone want to go first? Okay. So first, since you were saying that, I guess I'm wondering if someone chooses not to go with one of these set ADUs, or even if they do, what could still trigger it to come to SFDB? If it's in the front yard, or if they want to make it taller, what are some of those things?
This program would only be limited to ADUs that are 1-story, that are up to 800 square feet, and maximum 16 feet in height. So
But
the
that
idea
could be
is,
anywhere on the site.
yeah, it could be in the front yard potentially.
Okay.
If that's something that the board feels strongly about, we can, let me know, and we can
I
incorporate
think
that into
so.
the feedback.
And then another question is, what is the intent on trying to get these designs for the competition? Or is there compensation? Are we targeting certain groups?
For outreach, we've done a little bit of outreach so far to groups like the AIA, and we're going to be creating a web page as well that explains it. We'll probably do some sort of a press release, but the idea is just to cast a wide net and see how many submittals we get. We might get 5, we might get 50, we might get 500. We don't know yet. Other jurisdictions have been fairly successful in getting designers to submit plans, so we're hoping to receive at least a few to look at. And then to clarify that a little bit further, we would only have those plans linked on the city website to see, and the interested applicant would have to go through the designer themselves to contract, to buy the plans and to move forward. So
Okay.
it represents a pretty darn good business opportunity for designers and architects as well, because you can just have a ready-to-go plan set on the website, and the city can kind of funnel business your way. So that's a good benefit.
And is part of the discussion also how many, you said you want just one, and this might get more into discussion or not, but, a fear of only having one is, okay, now this same ADU is all over Santa Barbara, versus like I said, we want to have at least this when we start it, so that there's going to at least be some variety and options.
The goal is to have, well, by law, we're only required to create a process.
Sure.
So that's what we're doing right now. In addition to that, we'd love to have at least one plan set we can use. But LA, I think, has upwards of 80 at this point. They're worth taking a look at. I recommend going to LA DBS, Department of Building and Safety, and looking at that.
And then, sorry, one more question. You referenced the 1924 small house competition, and I've got that book. I've flipped through it and everything. Is there anyone on the city side, maybe the city architect or other people who are looking through that of any options that have already been designed that would fit these criteria to kind of be lumped in as that as well?
The small house competition was generally for larger houses. I looked through, larger houses than 800 square feet.
Okay.
I looked through that booklet. I think most of them tended to be in the 1,000 to 1,500 square foot range. But that said, there are lots of great design styles. I mean, if you look at a lot of the successful entries, they're kind of like what you see in San Roque, a lot of like small Spanish colonial revival style, some English vernacular as well. But there is good design inspiration in the 1924 small house competition booklet.
Now, one other question. For the building permit side, is the goal that, if a concept is kind of approved, that you already have on file what they would need for building department or certain details? What's the process there that you?
So I would say it's about maybe 90% complete in terms of what we know. I think in terms of building code, the idea is that we'd create a plan that works pretty much anywhere. with the idea that you'd be able to submit certain details on a case-by-case basis. Like, obviously, for these applications, people are going to need to fill in their site plan details. They're going to need to get foundation details, soils details, if those things apply, which normally they would. So there is going to be a certain amount of per project work that goes into these, but the idea is that the design is already taken care of. The structural calcs for the building are already taken care of. The foundation is kind of tricky, but I don't know a ton about building code, so I don't want to get too far into that without knowing what I'm talking about. But yeah, the idea is that it would just be kind of a plug and play plan that they could work with and then build a project out of.
Any other question? Thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've seen the set of plans that the city of Carp has, and they're out in the lobby. And it's pretty much a full set of plans. The one thing that I can already foresee as being, having to be determined after the site plan has been submitted is the orientation because of Title 24. So that's the one thing that I can think of that would not be a page that could be submitted as part of the generic set because, the Title 24 is determined by the orientation, so you can't do it until you know where it is on the site plan. But yeah, it's pretty interesting what they've already done and implemented in the city of Carpinteria. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, my only question was the siding issue. I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, it sounds like a great process, proposal, housing quicker. But you did say that we are looking for how many design solutions, and they would be potentially allowed in the front yard. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's my biggest concern. I don't see that as a great solution for our neighborhood compatibility. If, there's one, I mean, maybe it's, neighborhoods we look at with design solutions, and we can identify certain
Yeah, I'm helping
architectural
turn this
styles.
into a question, but if we, right now, as part of your process, is a part of that outlining what might trigger it to not get that kind of approval. So you've listed kind of your main three, but could being in the front yard or could being at certain properties trigger that it needed design review?
The idea is that it wouldn't with these applications. The idea is that they've already been pre-vetted by the design review boards, and that even if you have, say, a Spanish colonial revival house, you could put some sort of a modern thing in the front yard, even if it isn't matching the main residence. So that's a consideration that that I think could make this pretty challenging for the boards.
But is that a state requirement that it would need to be allowed in the front yard? I'm just trying to understand what. Right. I think it's totally reasonable in the backyard and getting a plug and play. In the front yard starts to really question the fabric that you see along the right of way and.
Yeah, we're talking about like making neighborhood compatibility findings.
Yeah, forget it. I mean,
Yeah. So just something
Well-
to consider.
Well, no, I'm just curious, what is the state law there and how do we foresee that?
The state law is fairly broad
Okay.
in terms of how it's written. It doesn't provide a whole lot of guidance in terms of here's where the ADUs can be located on the lot. That's up to the city. So we do have the ability to say these ADUs are only allowed in certain places on the lot. We want to try to give as many options as we can because sometimes for certain properties, the front yard might be really huge and an ADU might not be noticeable.
Right.
So that's what I'm coming to you with is questions on how do we resolve those kinds of questions and how do we get some parameters that'll work in most places for these ADUs.
Because you're right, there are some properties, they have so much front yard, they're so far out of sight, or they're significantly screened, the front yard doesn't matter. But there are lots of contexts where it would.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I should note, they still would have to meet zoning. So, meaning that you couldn't have it in the setback. It would, it would still have to meet zoning. So there are some rules that go with that. It would have to be single story. we're only talking about single story up to 16 feet, 800-foot max ADUs right now.
I know we probably don't have time, but at some point, could you pull the stat on how many ADUs, like in the last year, couple years, we've had that would be in the front yard that are single story? I'm just out of curiosity to know, like in those situations that I think are our worst fear, or a fear that we have with this, like how realistically, how many have there been that we see that are single story in the front?
I can do that. The other thing to consider is that we allow conversions of garages.
Right.
So you'll see a lot of garage conversion ADUs. Those tend to be, I mean, those have to match
Right.
those unless,
And that would still not be exempt through this because it's on the garage or through the garage. It wouldn't be them replacing it with one of these, or would it?
No, I guess not, unless they don't.
Right.
Because the whole thing is that it's a plan that they'd have to
Yep.
follow. So unless they
Yep.
demoed it, then it wouldn't count.
yeah, so this program, as far as I know, would not be, you wouldn't be able to demo your garage and build one of these ADUs. It would need to be a separate accessory building. That's not the garage.
Going back on the style compatibility, this is kind of a question to consider, but is it still something that would give an expedited process if they said, your house is so clearly this distinct style, you can pick from this range of styles? Is that an option to still kind of work with it, or it really is, oh, you can pick any of these?
That could be a route we go. We could say, okay, so there's this other program with the city called Objective Design and Development Standards. This is for multi-unit housing, so it doesn't apply to SFDB or single family, but it's kind of an interesting thing to consider. And the idea is that there are specific design styles around the city that are common and that would be allowed to have a streamlined process for these larger multi-unit projects. So those are contemporary, Mediterranean, and craftsman. And we're kind of thinking maybe if we use a similar approach to this program, we'd have some success in saying, okay, since you're this kind of house, you need to have this kind of style. But
Are there any broader requirements like materials matching? Like, we don't say, okay, it needs to be this color, but there's some sort of specification it needs to match existing or anything like that, or that's all out the window completely? Okay.
that's all out the window. It would just be too hard to know that.
Okay.
We can't know. The idea would be to have something that works pretty well, pretty much anywhere, but it
Okay.
wouldn't. It couldn't necessarily match exactly. That said, I think most owners are pretty happy to make their development, make their ADU match their house. Like, it's not. We don't typically see projects that aren't like that, but
No, but it brings in the question here, instead of just approving specific colors, that there be an option as well to say, or match the same paint as your existing house, or something like that is worth kind of considering as a part of it, instead of, only this color that's so different from your current house.
Yeah, because we don't want to incentivize somebody to go through the process to not match their house because it's an easier process, even if their preference would be to.
Right. Okay. Are there
That
any
makes
other
sense.
questions before we go into answering Ted's questions? Okay.
so we've kind of touched on this question. Should pre-approved ADU plans be a certain architectural style or styles? Already mentioned with the objective design and development standards, we have craftsman, Mediterranean, contemporary. Another option could be having, like I said, kind of a cake that you decorate. So having the general form of a building and then have different finish options. Like you've got your tile roof, your shingle roof, and your whatever other roof, standing seam metal. And then you have different siding options that are compatible with those.
Do you want
So there
to,
are
we'll
a
start
few
with
different
answers
approaches.
maybe on this side, and then we'll slide down.
So the question is, should there be different styles?
Should there be different styles, but are there any styles that you would point us toward recommending
The
or?
ones you said primarily, but then there's also subcategories of craftsman or of cottage, which would be like bungalow and Victorian.
English, yeah.
And, yeah, it's a bigger discussion for today, but I can see subcategories of cottage, and then I can see Mediterranean and contemporary. Those are the big ones that I could see.
Were you asking though, like, if the preference would be for us to have different plans, like an entirely different design versus one like very just generic where you add on different tile or add on different roofing? Or what, like, is that the question you were trying to ask, or?
The question is if we should, well, yeah, I guess both of those questions. So should we aim for any specific style? Like, do these ADUs just need to be Spanish colonial revival and or craftsman and or contemporary, like one of those three? Or if not, what are some parameters you think we should set on style? And I know style is it's a big conversation in general with design review.
I think I would be open to seeing what the architects of Santa Barbara create as this competition, and maybe there becomes a style category. I do think that it's worth then, instead of just, oh, you can pick any of these, still trying to be site conscious and what's allowed for whether it's a neighborhood area or whether it's matching the existing house in some sort of language. But I think you may get things that maybe fit into these kind of subcategory of styles. I think the plug and play is dangerous because you lose the, you don't just change out slate for red tile. There's different detailing that comes. And when it has a Spanish category, of the design, you're going to have different articulation of the windows and the way that the bullnose plaster instead of other treatments. So I don't think the plug and play is going to be best designed for Santa Barbara, but I do think it could be an interesting design challenge for the architects to say, this plan works, this elevation, do you want to provide, maybe after it goes through an alternate that is also capable with this, that, you can have this plan with these two things. And I did think on your list, it may be worth showing a range of options that help staff pre-approve off of these specific types. Like if it's a cottage, the XYZ is interchangeable, but not over here. That changes the style.
I agree. Roof slope is a big one, because that defines the style.
Right, but I mean, my concern is just that front yard. I mean, I actually think that and know of many friends who have something this small in their backyard, the 400 to 800 feet, and it's the same color, the same roof, the same pitch. But I feel like that, if it's in the rear yard, could be the frosting on the cake, because we want to make it simple. It's when it's in the front yard where, yeah, we do need those architectural styles that we discussed, the four, and maybe there's a landscaping component, and if they, check the box, yeah, it meets the, matches the original design, then it's pre-approved, like we have on our standard checklist already.
And there are elements from the current ADU ordinance that we would probably build in, like how, if it is in the front yard, we'd probably still want to have the screening that goes along with that. So, yeah, that's all good feedback. Thank you. So moving on, and we've already kind of touched on this as well, but I do like the question of sort of having the wedding cake idea and going with some form that it doesn't have to have all the architectural details lined out, but having kind of different checklists of like, okay, here's my general design, and here's some different options for making that work as far as style goes. I'm hearing from you that the plug and play is not a good way to go, but having like some more set options that get you closer toward a specific style would be best. Is that kind of?
I think we're saying that it's challenging.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, it's just challenging.
Okay.
Like, I think you could do that for some styles, but not when we think about Spanish or, I don't know, modern, like when we're thinking about the three main ones that you already covered, probably not for those three, but like you said, the subcategories of cottage or
Right, like within
farmhouse
this
or
category,
craftsman.
here are plug and play. I agree.
Yeah. It could be plug and play if it's more specific.
Single story, it's not going to be seen, really. I mean, maybe down the end of the driveway, but.
I can't hear you.
I mean, they're just teeny single stories, so they're really not visible unless they're at the end of the drive most of the time. I mean, again,
in the front yard.
My concern, yes, is the front yard. That is a whole different process. Not the rear yard.
All right, thank you. This is a juicy one. Are there any exterior finishes or materials that should not be allowed for pre-approved ADU plans? Things that are generally just not compatible.
You know,
we should try
one
to avoid.
suggestion that I have is that if they're proposing something that maybe seems a little out of the box, that as a part of the proposal, they show some level of compatibility. It doesn't have to match, it doesn't have to be the same. I think we're creative architects. But showing some level along with it, the same way that someone would come forward and show context. I know that this would then go anywhere, and that's kind of the tricky thing. I don't know, any other ones, thoughts?
Shiny materials. Just playing off of our neighborhood preservation
Yes.
ordinance findings.
Those are prohibited by code, so we're good there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things in the Hillside District, I think it'd be worth making sure that they're kind of looking through this. If we're going to require other homes to meet certain requirements and then not require that of ADUs, that gets complicated. So, we say that it needs to blend into the hillside. And so I think that that's something that should be considered for these.
Are there any specific considerations for these little one-story ADUs in the hillside?
Considerations for what?
For siting them in the hillside?
I think the roof will be important.
Okay.
Grading, heights of retaining walls.
And those will be separate, because this
it's
will
part of
exist
the-
without a site. I know, that's the
Yeah.
tricky thing.
Yeah, it's,
And I'm not sure if they could submit, they could probably submit under a combined development agreement.
Like the site work for it.
Yeah, TBD on that.
I mean, you might want to exempt projects that are over a certain percentage, are cited in a portion of a site that has over 20%, 25% slope or something like that. And, I mean, those are kind of nuances to this whole approval process that need to be considered. So I admire your ambition. It's going to be quite,
Well, you bring up a
Thank
good
you,
point.
Board Member Sherry.
If it's a significant hillside, like they're not just going to build it up on a plinth and that be allowed. It needs to
Right.
sink in some, and then the facades have to change. So,
so it's that the site specifics
Yeah.
of those
Right.
affect what the building looks like too.
right, how does it sit in? And now you've lost a facade, so what is that?
There may need to be a slope limitation
Right.
for these just because of the engineering considerations and the
so.
overall impact that could have. All right, any other material considerations? Anything you'd like to see? Guess it depends on the
A
style,
lot of
probably.
submittals from a lot of different,
I would like to
people.
see a lot. I would really like to see a concerted effort to try and really engage the architects in our community, and I think making it clear what the next steps would be, that it's not, oh, we're doing this work, we've got these plans, and they can just take them and run with them. What does that process look like, and what is the next step, and are they going to then need building permit drawings or stuff like that? I would rather, like you said, cast it wide, like how are we engaging younger architects and unlicensed as well, at least coming up with an idea, and then what happens there. I think that will be interesting as well. Is the city at least engaged in a way that if an idea comes forward, but they're not an architect to fully kind of develop it, can that go somewhere else, or is that lost as an option? And
Sounds like maybe a small ADU design charrette is in the works. Okay. All right, and the last question here just has to do with, kind of want to take your temperature on this and see, if you see a plan set come to you for review, there's no site attached to it, it's just a little ADU, is that something that you would feel comfortable kind of giving a yes or no vote on in terms of the pre-approval or stock ADU plan process?
I think so, but it's all those other factors like siting, visibility, where it is on the site, what is the neighborhood? Those things come into play, but it's in terms of like looking at a design that isn't cited, it's kind of hard because you don't have the orientation, but.
I know, I almost wonder, because site-specific design is so important to architecture, and that's what's so weird about, like, oh, I'm going to buy a little kit. But, that happened a lot. The Sears, building the cottage style, they could just pick from them. But there was enough variety. I almost wonder if, as a part of the charrette challenge, they have to place their ADU with, like, 2 different sites or 3 different sites, or maybe further in the design process. But if we're going to say, yes, this works throughout the city, are we really looking at how it will look next to all these different houses?
Because things that are going to come up are a lot of these in the backyards. They're, 4 feet from a property line. That's why I brought up orientation right away, because some are going to be next to a property line where there's a neighbor that has a building right at the property line, like a non-conforming garage, and they're not going to want the windows. So the first thing that I thought of when I saw the City of Carp's drawings was, so can they make changes to these? And I think they said no, like basically, like you have to use this as is, because you start making changes to doors and windows and orientation, it changes the structural engineering because it changes your braced wall panels and your lateral. So, so that's that orientation is huge. That's the challenge for these, I think. Reviewing something in a bubble, yeah, it's easy to say, yeah, that looks good.
Right.
It's like reviewing a mobile home
Right.
that can be moved around, or a boat, But then when you're talking about putting something on a site that's its forever location, totally different thing.
It may
Yep.
be that there's a state, I know that you've listed out potential stages as these go, but maybe that first one is a simple yes, no, here, is this worth progressing further? And when that gets progressed further, we need to really understand how it might work on these potential sites and in different contexts. And even what maybe things could change or not change on that and still be pre-approved.
Or the application, or the design comes with 4 options.
Right.
A north, south, east, or west orientation, property lines adjacent to the structure in close proximity on this elevation or that elevation or the other, so there's options within that design.
Right. If it's cited in a certain location too, there could be zones.
So would everyone else on here, though, be open to being able to provide comments and or straw votes?
Yes and no.
Cited. Yeah, I would say no.
To a
If
certain
it's not
extent, yeah.
cited.
Only until it gets to the hard questions about orientation and adjacency to other structures, siding, front yards, backyards. So yes, and then no.
Is that clear?
Understood. That's kind of how I feel about it too.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tricky because, we're just trying to get some parameters set for this. So I'm hearing that it would help for applicants for the initial phase to have different orientations on a site shown, just kind of as examples, and that'll help. It seems like having a more full picture of how one of these buildings could be built would be helpful. Okay. All right, yeah, we're building the submittal packets, the submittal requirements, so that'll be helpful to know.
Not just site, I think one thing for me compatibility-wise would also be showing, and maybe if the city picks like these 3 types of homes or something, or pick whatever it is, that they place it next to visually. And that way, you know, if we're saying, okay, if your house is already next to a Spanish Mediterranean house, now what does this look like next to this, or what would this plug and play look like? I think that will be important. Now, whether that's part of the initial review or that happens later.
But that's
I don't
not
know.
pre-approval. Like, we're talking about.
No, I know, this is part of the process, though, to get it approved. So, you know, first is our architects are going to submit a concept, and maybe at that initial one, it doesn't matter so
Oh, you're
much, but I
talking about
think
getting the designs approved to be
to
included.
be a
Okay, got it.
pre-approval one, right? But I think in order to reach that final step that it is selected, I think it'll be important that we can identify that it will look good next to a variety of house types.
Okay?
Thoughts? Good, okay. Anything else?
Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Okay. We will move on to our second item, which is a continued item here for concept review, 351 La Marina. This is a proposal to convert an existing 446 square foot detached 2-car garage to an accessory dwelling unit. The project includes a 228 square foot addition to the garage to connect it to the primary residence and create a 674 square foot ADU and a second floor addition above the proposed ADU, consisting of a 296 square foot bonus room and a 341 square foot deck, a new 26 square foot ground level storage closet. The total 2,568 square foot development on a 6,227 square foot lot is 94% of the maximum required floor to lot area ratio. The project is associated with an existing 1,572 square foot single unit, single story residence in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone. A coastal permit is required for the ADU. No final appealable decision will take place. Neighborhood preservation findings will be required for PDA. This project was last reviewed on January 16th. So, if you don't mind, great, stating your names and then going through any of the items brought up before, and then any changes in your drawings.
Thank you. Kyle Dixon, Windward Design Services.
Mark Winke, architect.
Yeah, there was quite a few comments, and I believe we've done our best to address the majority of them. The first comment was that the board requested floor to lot area ratio information for the 2 residents that flank the parcel. The requested that the applicant provide information on the footprint of the residents on those flanking parcels. The board requested a street silhouette study that included at least the 2 residences to either side for a total of 4 residences and the subject property. The board is generally supportive.
Mine,
Going between the 2?
yeah, and if a few bundle together, then that's good, and you
Okay.
can show us then in the drawings where they are.
Perfect, yeah. So I guess we can start with those first 2 comments. That'll be the easiest ones on our cover sheet. Down here, I've provided just a general neighborhood FAR study of the surrounding properties. And as you can see, our proposal is different than what is indicated in the scope. This is due to us improperly populating the FAR calculator on our initial submittal. We included areas in it that should be exempt, which include the ADU. So ADUs technically are protected under the California Government Code section and should be exempt when in considerations.
They are part of FAR. They are included. So just, if that doesn't include the 70% does not include the.
The ADU, that's
Okay.
correct.
Or the ADU, yeah.
So with the ADU, it's at 94.
With the ADU, the estimate is 94.
Okay.
The estimate's what?
94.
94.
94, okay.
So as you can see here, these, I guess you would denote this 70% as 94. So yeah, it is significantly larger than the surrounding properties in the neighborhood. As we'll move on to the street silhouette
Oh,
elevation.
sorry, do you have the footprints? That was the second item.
Yeah, that's shown on our site plan here. You can see we've gone ahead and updated that to include both the neighboring properties here and here relative to our proposal. The next comment was to provide a silhouette study, which I've added here on our second sheet.
Can I interject at this point? Are we just checking these off, or are we going to actually talk about each one of them? It seems like we're just doing a checkbox. Do we
Yeah,
have it? We have it.
first is
Let's
any
move
comments that you
forward.
have in regards to those minutes and showing us that they're a part of this. You can expand
Yeah.
and talk about as much as you want, and then it will go to questions. We'll ask
Exactly.
questions, and then there will be time for us to do comments.
All right, otherwise it'll take a lot longer if we double up on everything.
Yeah.
So let's make our presentation.
Okay, you got it. So we'll work through the neighborhood photos. We've added this to identify our property, the surrounding properties in the neighborhood. And this is probably the closest, 2-story with a deck. This is 2 houses down from us. Across, this is catty corner at where Cliff meets La Marina. This is 1 down, another down, and then the final 2 photos are the properties shown here in the silhouette. This one being the closest, and then the next one uphill, 355. So I believe one of the issues that we faced was kind of a difference in aesthetic. We had 2 different looks to the original. So after talking to our client, we came back with what I feel is a more modern approach. We're taking that gable roof off the main house now, shown here, and going with a flat roof to meet that old addition that existed. So I think the best kind of look to this is from the street here. And so now what we've done is we've brought that new roof plane in low to meet the existing and coming right underneath that same deck height. We've changed the angle of the roof over the second-story addition as was suggested to kind of help tie in the existing roof to that. And then the same over here. These are all kind of like a 1 in 12 flat roof. I think the roof over the main house had to be set to 3% just to make the ridges connect properly.
So in other words, they decided to take an MCM approach, mid-century modern, pick up on the front part of the right-hand part of the existing house, and completely redesign the roofscape of the existing front house.
We revisited the colors and tried to go with something that wasn't as different. You know, we had blue siding previously and kind of various. So what we've gone here is to go with kind of more earth tones, kind of a softer stucco that has kind of a eggshell cream, and then doing dark accents with green on our exposed wood treatments and Oxford brown siding both on the fences. And what we're showing here is kind of a little accent wall, like a veneer that we would hang just to kind of tie the fence lines into it, so it's not just all stucco along the front face there. The deck edge here has also been changed. We kind of showed a rail system before, and now what we've done is keeping the cap the same all the way around and just going with kind of like an opaque glass at the top. Our sections, so now with the change of the roof, I think the one thing that's evolved, we're still 8-foot plate height at the first and second level, and now we're at 9.3 here at the upper end. So I think that picked up slightly from the previous version we had presented. I'll kind of give you another look at the renders. I think we're doing kind of a burnt sienna as a call out for the roof finish, and we'll match that on all 4 roof planes. That kind of helped tie into the stucco and the more earth tone color palette.
Before we go too far, on that upper right rendering, you can see the high glass on the ADU.
Yeah.
That portion there is purposely designed so that anyone standing in that ADU room won't be looming down onto the neighbor's backyard, adjacent to the property on the left.
Yeah, I believe one of the comments was about making sure we address privacy over the rear yard in that area. I think at this time that concludes includes, let me double check the minutes to make sure we've spoken to everything. But yeah, we've tied in the aesthetic to be more modern, revisited our color study for more earth tones. The guardrail was replaced with a set cap height and our glass, opaque glass. And then, yeah, we did take the suggestion to rotate that roof line over the second story. Well, I guess one final thing as well that I did not mention is that second story, we did change the footprint a bit and pulled that front wall back a few feet to kind of cut down on the shape. Before it was just one large box that we kind of set above, and so since then we've been able to bring in a post and some exposed rafter ends through here, kind of give it a little bit more uniqueness to its look.
I think also it's good to mention at this point that the roof deck, which is off that area, is now more centrally located in the property.
Yeah, I do believe that the edge now is 15 feet off. Yeah, that will conclude my presentation.
All right, thank you. We will open it up to public comment.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. I'll start with in-person public comment. I do have a slip from Helen Good. Ms. Good, if you could please step up to the podium. You will have 2 minutes to speak.
If you can make sure that the microphone is on. Thank you.
You tell me how to move or how to do this. I feel very uncomfortable being here. I feel very uncomfortable commenting. This second floor maybe has changed a bit. I assume they are going away with the garage. Is that what, is the garage leaving? You're not going to have a garage, is that right? No garage? No. Okay, well, they're taking away the garage, and on top of whatever is going to be the garage, they are going to put, it's too close to us. I mean, it's there, our hedge is here, and the garage is here. The house will look down on our, we call it our peaceful lawn, and all of our privacy will be gone. It almost touches our hedge. It is planned on top of their garage, which won't be there. It is behind their house. It will be there for us to see. We will see it. They won't see it. They will be blocking our view of the mountains. They will also eliminate the morning sun. We won't get the morning sun. The rooftop deck will certainly encourage more noise and more peering on us. We have gone through this closeness to them for the last 24 years. They've been flying flags there that have been very disagreeable to us. At first, they were flying United States flags on the 4th of July, which was good. Yes, we were all happy. It was nice for the neighborhood. But then they switched to crossbone and getting a little nervous here, and which is not good. The crossbones and the skull was there, but it wasn't only there during the daytime.
Time, but if you want to make a quick final statement.
Okay, there have been flags there for 24 hours for 24 years. And they hang there until there's nothing there. It's just a rag. And I'll ask one question, I guess. I mean, we're all uncomfortable with it. Are you going to require story poles? Is that the term? So that we can see exactly what's happening? I hope I came, well, anyway.
No, that was great. Thank you. Okay.
That's what?
That was helpful. Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome.
Are there any other public comments?
At this time, I do not have any further slips for public comment. There's another
Oh,
gentleman.
we have some more.
Here, it's yours.
Please.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Helen, can you let us know what your address is?
Yes, it's all written down. It's on the thing.
It's 340 Pacific View.
I have written many letters. I don't know if you've gotten them. Sent many pictures. For the previous hearing.
Right. Okay.
Okay, next up, we'll have Catherine Taveja. Thank you for pronouncing that for me. You'll have 2 minutes to speak as well.
Hello to all of you. I live directly behind this development. My concern is how high that section, if you could show a picture of the house itself, that elevated section that is way in the back against the back of the property, they have met the concerns of the homeowners that are flanking this development. There is no mention of the people that are behind this development. And that one section, the overall design to me is wonderful, but that elevated section will look right down into our yard, will block that area, and it's going to be quite an eyesore because as shown on the drawing, the green space is below the top height of the roof, which goes to show that it will be up quite a bit. The only recourse we have is to put in a lot more vegetation and grow the hedge up to about 10 to 12 feet to block that. So that's, I think it's a valid concern. The rest of the house is great, but to project that one section, there's no way we're going to get around that. So that's my comment.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jim Murdoch. Mr. Murdoch, you also have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Jim Murdoch. I'm the president of the Vista Pacific Owners Association, which is behind this property. These two prior ladies are members of that association. It's a planned unit development right behind the subject property. And my only comments, and some are probably more general as to the whole ADU process, but and it's my understanding you can't impose a parking requirement, but we're close to City College, so parking can always be a problem. For example, on Cliff Drive in front of our development, it's all red. You can't park on Cliff Drive there. But you go on the side streets, La Marina, San Rafael, Oceano, you have a lot of students parking there because they don't have permits on City College. So now we're eliminating a garage on a property, and not only eliminating the garage, we're providing for more people to live on that property, yet we're not addressing the parking issue. And to show you how bad that is, or to illustrate, go out to Isla Vista. And I know I went to school at UCSB, and you go down on Del Playa, and parking's a nightmare. It was then, and that was a long time ago. So I think, I don't know what the solution is. Maybe it goes back to the prior gentleman to discuss requiring a certain amount of parking on the base house, and then maybe that's the way you deal with the ADU indirectly. And the other issue, as Catherine brought up, is the privacy issue. They did a nice job in providing the higher windows to the, I guess, the south facing, so those neighbors aren't impacted, but they didn't address behind. It seems like it's across the street and next door on each side are more important than the property behind, but that's also should be a consideration. And we have two, basically older ladies, single ladies that live right behind there. So I think privacy should be some consideration in this. And I mean, when I first heard about ADUs, I thought, what a great way to screw around with the city, and because I'm in the real estate business.
You're out of time now, but you can make a final statement.
But anyway, the reality is it kind of hits home a little more when it's dealing with your neighborhood. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to virtual comment on this particular item. I do not have any hands raised at this time, and we did not receive any written correspondence for this item. So at that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Lewis.
All right, thank you. We will start with questions. Does either side want to go first? Okay.
So, thank you so much for addressing all of our comments and even suggesting the roof removal of the main house. I'm impressed with what you've come back with. My only concern still is the FAR and the difficulty of the two-story
Yes.
ADU. Sorry.
If you can phrase it into a question.
Yeah, I'm I'm getting there. Not that quick. So, 343, do you have the FAR on that?
Yeah.
And then, if you can show us the site plan as well.
Yeah, so for 343, I believe.
You're supposed to be positive, by the way. I was giving the positive there.
So yeah, 343, which is 2 down, they're at 66%. And this information was just gathered from the assessor's information provided.
Okay, right, because you show that in the street silhouette and it looks like a two-story.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
I would say they're the closest that resembles our proposal.
Okay, a couple down. Okay, and then the site plan, if you can go there and just maybe explain, I know the ADU's on the second floor, but what's the whole front addition?
So yeah, just to clarify, the garage conversion is the ADU, and we're proposing an addition at the front of that at the lower level. And this is sitting below that kind of flat roof. The second story is only accessible from the outside staircase, and it would be like a bonus room. So it's its own standalone space, separate from the ADU.
It's just a bonus room?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. Got it. And then the windows on the back, facing the back property.
So, sorry, let me get to the floor plan. Yeah, maybe that was a bit of confusion. The proposed windows here actually sit, they're egress windows for these bedrooms at the lower level, and they come out to the back end of the property where the equipment is kept, this pool equipment, this HVAC. And then the second story above, we have 2 smaller 2x3 windows.
So on your south elevation, they're not visible because it's showing the wall.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, I think these are the
Or the
2 at the
missing.
higher level, yeah.
All right, and the size of the deck?
Yeah, our proposed deck area, I believe, hang on, I have it listed on the front page here. The second story deck is 341 square feet.
Okay, but centrally located, those are my questions.
It is, yes, 15 feet off, and it sits right over the master bedroom of the main residence at the back end.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions over here? Board Member Sherry?
I have a couple. There was a comment about that the ADU, the proposed ADU touches the hedge. What's the setback on the ADU?
So
The garage is,
we did 4 feet just here at the addition, but the existing wall does sit just a foot off of their property line where that fence is. They have an existing fence that
And
is
the
right
upper
there.
level stacks on that wall?
No, the upper level is 6 feet in.
Would
6
you
feet
mind
in.
showing that on page A102?
Yeah, A102, yeah.
This is based on that neighbor's comment about it saying that the ADU was like basically sitting at the hedge at the property line. So it's just the area that's the portion of the garage conversion that is closest to the property line. Everything else is 4 feet, 6 feet away.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, this setback, this 6 foot is where we are showing that second story wall line.
And the solar, are you in one of those northeast, northwest kind of orientations where you had 2 north solar ordinance requirements to make? Because she said she's going to lose her morning light, and whoever that neighbor
not.
was, and I'm having a hard time believing that if the solar ordinance is met. So I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, so on our elevation, I've shown how we meet that clearance here at the rear of the property. And yeah, and the house, I guess this wall here is oriented northwest, technically.
Okay.
Or is that right? Yes, yeah.
That's it. Thanks.
Most of my questions have been answered. The one other question I actually have is from the front. I know and I don't know if this is the rendering or not, but I know currently there's like vegetation under the front windows. There's like planted areas, and that's not here. Is that going away? Is that proposed to go away?
No.
Or it's just that you're not there yet?
Yeah, at the front
Okay.
of the property, the only thing I believe we've discussed is removing, there's a portion of brick, like a brick planter. And so we've gone forward with taking that off of the property. But right now, yeah, no adjustments for the landscaping right along the front wall to the living room off of the entry.
Okay. Let me make sure the rest of my questions have been answered. Can you go over the height again of the back accessory?
Yeah.
The total height, like at the very top point?
Yeah, so we're proposing, it looks like 19 foot 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm looking at
And most of part of that's buried anyways.
existing photos. Will you show a section again where you can see that back wall from the rear of the property? Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
so
you
this
can
is our-
see parts of it,
Yeah.
but it goes up even higher,
It
right?
does, that's
Right.
correct, yeah. So when we had a survey done on the property, the furthest back we could get to was 113, and our finished floor is at 100.
Okay.
Is how we're basing that.
And do you have a comparison of where, the existing garage has a tall pitch on it? Do you have a comparison of where that existing height is compared to where your new one? Or could you do an approximate, maybe?
I don't believe I have that.
Okay.
I can,
the elevation.
yeah,
Or
we
even
may-
you've got like the existing
may-
railing on your, okay,
Yeah, it looks like the top of the gate, we're calling it 1110.
okay.
We have gone out with poles, but I don't know how accurate. But I feel confident in that. That's
Okay.
probably maybe 12 feet at most.
Okay. And then real quick, could you show us the old plans again? Just quickly so we see how the roof pitch changed on the back ADU. I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah. So at first we were bringing that forward, and then this is that existing gable roof on the main house, and then this is our new proposal.
So does your tallest height there with the slope, is that higher than where you were before or just angled differently?
No, it's the
Okay.
same, just angled differently.
Okay. All right, any other questions? All right, let's move on to comments. Or I guess, one last question. For the parking, that might be a planner question, but are there any discussions of how parking with removing the garage?
Yes, so when you convert a garage to an ADU, you have to replace those parking spaces on site, but they can be uncovered. So in this case, they're proposing 2 tandem spaces in the driveway. They do have support from Public Works, so they'll be getting a waiver for that at the building permit stage. And then parking for the ADU is not required just due to its location, its proximity to public transportation. So they do not have to provide a spot for the ADU.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to comments. Board Member Anderson, do you want to go first? Or last? Okay, we'll start over here with Board Member Sherry.
So I appreciate that you listened to our last comments. Thank you. I much prefer this design and the changes to the roof that you made, and I appreciate that that you have taken into consideration protection of for privacy purposes, moving the deck toward the inner part of the property or making the windows higher, even though that's higher windows on a 6-foot setback or a 4-foot setback are not necessarily required, but that was very nice of you to incorporate that for the neighbor. I don't think they think it's enough, but thank you. I just want to acknowledge and thank you for that. And you have to have windows. So I I think that it's a good solution with this mid-century modern approach for you to have chosen the higher windows on this project. And the FAR, I think, and my comment is kind of to staff. Like, I feel like we have this conversation over and over again about whether or not FARs are required to be included. And so I have a scenario I just want to run by you really quick. If they came in with an 85% FAR on a project, and then later, a few years later, came in with an ADU, the ADU would still be allowed, and it wouldn't be considered in the FAR, right? So then my question is, if it's not considered, if the answer to that question is no, that it would not be considered.
The answer is yes.
Oh,
So it would be considered as part of FAR later, and if it was over 100%, it would require a zoning modification for an increased FAR, for this lot, because it's a smaller lot. So this proposal complies with FAR in terms of zoning at 94%. That includes the ADU. For SFDB, once it's over 85%, I think you guys look at it with a little more scrutiny in terms of size, bulk, and scale. And FAR is just one of your tools. It's not the only tool, and it's not always the best tool. Sometimes it's great. So just keeping those things in mind, it does comply with zoning, though.
Okay. So for what it's worth, I'm okay with the FAR. I just wanted to state that I'm going to be one of those that's okay with it because of the mass, bulk, and scale and the proposal of the second story in the back. Those are my comments.
All right, thank you. Board Member Graffiti.
Okay, thank you for a lot of the changes. I agree. I think the overall design is better. It flows better. I appreciate, I think you mentioned you brought the deck in into that 15-foot minimum that we kind of look for on the board to feel comfortable with those. And let me struggle through verbalizing my thoughts here. I think I'm a bit more torn on the FAR. I'm not usually. I think part of me is just because it's so much higher than the other ones around it, I would feel better about, actually contrary to Board Member Sherry, I would feel better about it if the second story element was brought in forward more or more central to the house. I think we've seen a few plans recently where, I recognize it's not an ADU on the second story, it's an accessory room, but regardless, and especially that it's 4 to 6 foot setback, I just have a harder time in terms of making like privacy findings, even with the changes made, and also just looking at patterns of development. So that's just like the one piece of this project that I'm struggling with. I agree. I don't ever want to incentivize somebody to come to us without an ADU, thinking that, it would be easier to do it separately. Like we prefer everything as one design together to see the true FAR. So that's in the back of my mind. But the ADU is also on the first story, and there's square footage added to the kind of connect the previous garage to the house. And so I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if I have a very 100% decision yet in my mind about this one. I'm looking forward to hear what the other board members, but I am struggling with it a little bit just in terms of where that square footage is placed on the property.
Thanks. I think size, bulk, and scale, well, I agree with most of the comments made, and I do think general materiality and design is in a great direction. As far as the FAR, I think from our board, it's really the size, bulk, and scale, and I think you've done a good job of minimizing that from the street side. I think it's expected in these neighborhoods to start to see some second stories come forward, and I think that you've done it very successfully. I think the windows up on the neighbor side are clear story, which means you're not standing and looking outside. They're up above your head. You wouldn't be able to look out and then look down. I think that is great. I think it's worth studying then how necessary with the room function are the windows on the I don't know, where's your direction, north, south, east? I'm looking for,
South.
on the backside.
Yeah, south side.
You know, if those are also potential to kind of reduce privacy, but I think, you know, looking at a site map, the property behind you is pretty far back. And so I don't actually think there's a concern there. And given the slope that happens already on your site, and the fence that's there, it's almost as if you were adding a one-story in that condition. And I think that's pretty reasonable. And I do think it's scale-wise a decent fit. And those are my general comments. I think if you guys are open at all, a slight reduce in that pitch on the second story, I think will help align a little bit more with what's existing and not feel as tall. But in general, I think it works really well. Board Member Anderson?
Yeah, I'm struggling a bit with just, you know, ADU, just a small amount of, it is a two-story in the patterns of development that are changing our neighborhoods. But this is placed so far back on the site. I mean, it's a different thing when it's on the front setback. So, yeah, I agree with most of the comments that have been made by the board. You've done a good job to, you know, address all of our previous comments. You know, was struggling a little bit with the FAR, but it's just the nature of where we're headed at 94%. So, yeah, in general, my only other comment would be add the beams on the ADU, eave side, you know, same detailing as the rest of the house, the beam extensions.
I'm curious, it's not on. I'm curious the board's thoughts on the windows facing the two neighbors in any direction that you want to give, or kind of approval or not of how they are right now.
In regards to size?
In regards to location, size, privacy.
I don't have any issues with them.
I'm okay with them. The windows and the setbacks of the house meet the zoning ordinances, and you can't design a building without windows. So I've said this before. I think it's really considerate of them to have made the windows higher, but in some cases you just can't. You've got to see out windows. And until the city changes the zoning ordinance requirements for setbacks, then I'm going to continue to approve windows when they augment and create quality architecture.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with the windows, and you know, that existing wall of the garage, you know, I don't believe in two wrongs make a right, but it was there.
Right,
You know,
right.
so
I
that's my
agree.
only other, you know, issue, potentially,
Right.
so.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
And Chair Lewis, if I
yes.
could just interject.
Yes.
Before you make your motion, if you feel the project is ready, we're looking for a continuance to the staff hearing officer for consideration of the coastal development permit. And then also for you to let us know if you would like this to return to full board or consent.
If we can take a straw poll for consent or full board?
Yes.
No, which one?
Consent.
Consent? Full board. I'd be okay with consent, full board. Okay, I'm okay leaning full board. All right, I move to continue this project to the staff hearing officer indefinitely with the following comments. The board is in support of the general architectural language and the modifications to the existing house to bring a cohesive language to the addition and existing. The board is in support of the natural material palette suggested and matching architectural details from the existing to the proposed. The board appreciates the siding of the second story and balcony to be further back on the property and centrally locating the balcony. The board is in support of the roof pitches being of a similar design and is open to studying minimizing the pitch on the second story to reduce the tallest height. And the board is in support of the size, bulk, and scale of the proposed project as it responds well to the neighborhood.
I'll second that with a consideration for one minor change to the item about the decks, where you said to be, you said something about like for the, instead of, that might be construed as they should be changed.
Oh, that they are.
Instead, replace to be with that are.
Okay. I accept. You're seconding?
Yes.
Okay. We can take a roll call.
I was wanting to, well, I just made a suggestion earlier to consider the same detail on the main house as the ADU with the beam extensions. So it's compatible detailing.
Yeah. I included a more general that the details should match.
Okay,
Not
cool.
specifically. Okay.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Chair Lewis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Sherry.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will take a quick 5-minute break. Is that okay? Restroom break. Okay.
You're the boss.
transition to our third item. This is a new item here for concept review, 219 Vista Del Mar. This is a proposal to demolish the legal non-conforming portion of the garage that encroaches into the front setback and construct a 67 square foot conforming addition to the existing 362 square foot two-car garage, and construct a 482 square foot accessory dwelling unit above, including an 86 square foot deck and a 46 square foot balcony. The ADU is under the SFDB purview. An existing 1,717 square foot single unit residence will remain. A ministerial coastal exemption is required for the addition. Approval of a coastal development permit is required for the ADU by the staff hearing officer. The proposed total of 2,628 square feet of development on a 14,016 square foot lot is 62% of the maximum required floor to lot area ratio. No final appealable decision will take place today, but we will need neighborhood preservation findings and hillside design district and slope lot findings when it's reviewed for PDA. Are there any staff comments for this one?
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Just that if the board feels it's ready, this project could be continued to the staff hearing officer after today's concept hearing.
Okay. All right. So if you can make sure your microphone is on and state your name, and then walk us through your drawings.
Certainly. Chris Cottrell, architect. We actually did the project on this house, vaulting the main space, and did an addition in back a couple years ago. So the existing house is all vaulted in back. This ADU is over the garage. The garage itself is about 2 feet lower than the main house. So you've got kind of a step in the plate heights. I'll show you when we get to plan, but this little bump is just a low height storage area. It's actually like 2 feet higher because it's above the house plate, if that makes sense. I'll just zoom in. Get to full page so you can see these better. Okay, so existing house, nicely remodeled. They've got board and batten, kind of black windows. Just give you some views here. This is from the street. This is the back of the house. Neighbor to the west, and then back of the house. Sorry, let's see. It's always fun driving a different Acrobat. Okay, so here is the existing garage, and then we've got, this is outside. They've got an outside stair and an inside stair. This ADU may be used by a family member or as a rental. So it kind of goes both ways, which is super handy and flexible. The inside stair takes you up. There's that little storage bump I was telling you about. So that's actually a decent step up there. Let's see, it's 14 inches higher, so they have to step up to get storage in there. But the nice thing is that keeps it low. So I guess my point in talking about this is that the ADU itself is lower plate to plate than the house. So it's like not 8 foot plate, 8 foot ADU. It's really 8 foot plate and then 6 foot plate for the ADU. So it's not a full 2-story. We've got a little deck. It's not an actual sitting deck. It's more to get these doors open that opens out over the neighbor's driveway. That neighbor has submitted a letter of approval for this. He's happy with how it is. No issues there. And then to kind of break up the 2-story in front, we're keeping a little chunk of the existing roof on the front yard setback to kind of give that elevation. Sorry, let me zoom out. Here it is, roof plan, elevations coming here. Okay, here's from the driveway. So the garage is not a straight entrance. You turn to the right, and then this is the street elevation. There's that little eyebrow of roof that's staying there, and there's that little it's more like a Juliet balcony to let those doors open rather than an inhabited deck. And then just some details, just so you can see the section. Let me try to zoom in there a little bit. Yeah, so you can see how the plate of the garage is lower than the plate of the house. So that storage area is a little bit up. But it's pretty simple little ADU. We're going to match all existing, it's going to be board and bat, black windows, same roof. It should look nice and sharp. But I'll stop it there and let you guys ask questions, and we can go from there.
All right, thank you. We'll open up to public comment.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do not have any slips for in-person public comment. However, if anyone wishes to make a comment, please fill one out and bring it to me. I will move on to virtual public comment. And at this time, I see no hands raised for this particular item. However, we did receive written correspondence for this item from Mr. Norm Gardner. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Lewis.
All right, thank you. We'll start with questions. Any questions, Board Member Sherry?
Can you go to the site plan again, please? Just looking for orientation, and north is the back, okay. And where's the portion of the non-conforming portion of the garage that you're demolishing in the front yard?
I think it's a touch screen too. That might be helpful.
No way.
Okay.
Sort of. Let me see.
Okay, never mind.
It's honestly
I
this
think on
little.
page A21 in elevation, is it the red portion?
It's just this. You see where the property line bends right there? So that setback, it ends up clipping the corner of the garage by like 6 inches.
Oh, it's just that little
It's
piece.
like a nothing burger. Yeah. Nothing going there.
Not worth talking about. Okay, that's it.
Any questions?
Sure. So I have 3. Can you show us on the section the 8-foot and 6-foot plates?
Yeah, so it's not a 6-foot plate, but comparison to if I stuck this thing on top of the house.
Yeah? It's 6 foot higher, the ridge. But we're on the front of the house, on the street.
There's that little setback. Sorry to have to scroll through a page down, you guys.
It's fine.
So the top plate of the main floor is 9.4. That's kind of coming across right there. And the top plate of the ADU is 17. So.
Oh, is your microphone on? Will we make sure?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So that would be 8. Oh, okay, but you're just, the 6 foot you were talking about was just, it's
In
the
comparison
ridge
to the house.
height
Yeah.
is going to be.
So since we're stacking on top of the garage, which is lower, it's like
Right.
less high than the
Right,
top of the
right,
house.
right,
Yeah.
right, gotcha, okay. And then I believe it's the east neighbor, privacy, have you, discussed? That's more concerning on that side or the right side. Can you talk a little bit more about windows on that and
That
the
was the neighbor
stairway?
who
That's the neighbor
submitted.
who submitted an approval letter.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. And then the only thing is, for me, is the balance of the ADU in its location on the house. And so I want to know what other options, design-wise, you may have considered for placement of the ADU, possibly covered deck in the front. I know you said you've got like a little 2-foot eyebrow, but to break up the massing, what other, did you come up with any other ideas?
Yeah, well,
And why you maybe didn't go that route?
Yeah. So to keep, if it's a future rental, to defray cost of living in Santa Barbara, having it there over the garage keeps it separate from the house rather than sort of putting it in the backyard. So it keeps the yard for the house. So it's a nice separate place. It has access from the street. So that was the main driver. And then not, typical wedding cake, SFDB, not putting it in the middle of the house. We can't do that. The house is vaulted. So there's no doing that. So it was a pretty clear direction to put it where we did.
And there is a Dutch gable on the one side of the house, right? I mean, that sets back a little bit further, or gives you a little more relief.
Yes.
Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
See some pictures. There we go. Are you talking about this gable right there?
I thought it was on the side of the house on one side was a Dutch gable.
We've got the main vaulted space peeking over the front right there.
Right.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
That guy right there. So right now it hips back to this half gable, so that would go away, and we'd actually, rather than having the hip across the front, we'd have a gable across the front. Just sort of.
Right, but that's only a couple feet.
You're right, it's a couple
is
feet.
what you're looking at.
Yep. And there's some nice layered landscape in front of it too to help soften that. That's not going anywhere, just getting thicker.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned board and batten, but that won't be up on the second story, or it's just not drafted, or?
It's not drafted.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
It will be up there.
Okay. Will you have a similar sort of horizontal line that associates with the windows like you do on the first floor, or what are you thinking?
You mean as far as this base here?
Yeah.
I know, I think we take the battens all the way up.
Okay.
Yeah. But here you can see that break between the garage and the house. Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Okay, we'll move to comments.
Can you go to the elevations page again? Not the rear elevation so much as the front. First of all, the front elevation, that one. So stop right there. And while it is only a couple of feet, I appreciate the setback. And I also can see the challenges of where to locate this ADU. And I typically feel the same way about ADU's placement, and that the very front of the house is one of the places that is my least favorite, but I can see your challenges, and I appreciate the gable. As long as that is a centered gable that just doesn't go all the way to the east wall, and there's it looks like there is a line. Yeah, there is. Okay. And that's where you're cutting off that 6 inches.
Yes.
Okay. And then on the west elevation,
If it loads, there we go.
just that one.
Yep.
You've also got a break up there with the overhang,
Yes.
which I also appreciate. That breaks up that plaster, because those walls are stacked as well.
Those are stacked, yeah. And that will be board and batten up there.
Are you changing the garage door? Because it looks like a different garage door than what you have.
No, we're going to keep what's there.
So it's not going to be that one.
It's not going to be that beautiful garage door that we have modeled there.
It's not going to be the one in the drawings.
It'll be in the photo, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't have a problem with the mass bulk and scale of this, because the second story is broken up. The 2-story stacked massing is broken up. And makes it more, the second story massing stacked makes it more appropriate, in my opinion. So, and I appreciate the board and bat. I think it'll be a nice addition to the house.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's comments. Any comments?
No, I'm in support of the project for a lot of the reasons that board member Sherry mentioned. I think it is cited well, and the way that you've have some relief from on the second story back. I know even in that neighborhood, there's a couple examples. One where it's just like a complete box for, I think it's right across the street or around the corner. So this is definitely not doing that, and I think it blends well with the neighborhood, and it's a pretty house. So yeah, I'm in support of the project.
Board Member Anderson?
So I would like to see more articulation in the front setback. There are 4 or 5 other houses on the block that are 2 stories, and they're either in the rear, or they've done a little more work to balance the 2-story mass on the front property line. So that's just me. More step back on the eyebrow, a deck. I feel like it could be a comment consideration to improve the massing on the front of the house.
Yeah, I agree with the comments. I appreciate the discussions with the neighbor. That makes it very easy and helpful on our part. I also think that it helps that it's facing a driveway, the glazing that's open there, and the stairwell access. I agree that you're limited on where you can place this, and agree with Board Member Sherry on you're not doing a second story across the entire building, so I think that it's quite appropriate. And I do think it's worth studying that south elevation of the addition. And once you add in that board and batten and the detailing, I think that will be good for us to take a look. I think already the addition of windows help liven it from the solid facade that it is right now at the garage. So, yeah. For staff, are there any other comments besides going to the staff hearing officer that we'll want to make sure to include for them?
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Since this project doesn't require a zoning modification, it's just a simple coastal development permit read by the staff hearing officer. Essentially, the question is, do you want to see this back before it goes to the staff hearing officer?
I'd also like a straw poll of whether it can go to consent after this or full board.
Consent, and I have one more comment that I
Okay.
wanted to state when you get done.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Consent.
Okay, me too.
Going to consent?
Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone else agrees, but we would like your feedback
Okay.
too. Okay. Board Member
I
Sherry?
wanted to point out, because I know Board Member Anderson was asking for further study, or would appreciate further study on the front elevation to bring the second story back. And I wanted to point out a couple of things. And if you go to the photo of the front of the house, the street's quite a bit below. And while I think it's a good comment, and if it was easy, I think I would make the same comment, but I'm thinking about the size of this ADU. And as soon as you can't go, it's not like you can pull the garage forward. So as soon as you start thinking about what are the benefits versus the costs on this? And then when you think about you can't move the garage forward to provide more differentiation between the 2 levels, and then if you push the upper level back and it's not stacked, then you have to create a beam that ends up hitting the front garage beam and drops down below, gets in the way of the garage door opener sometimes, maybe not, but it makes it makes the ADU smaller too. The biggest one is it makes the ADU smaller. It also, from a structural standpoint, makes it a little more challenging. And also just the reason I wanted pulled up this photo of the front of the house is because 1 or 2 foot difference in that gable on the front is not, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, it's not going to make or break this project, but I just wanted to point that out for me.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, that it'll significantly alter the interior usability without significant change to what you'll see from the street view.
There's many things that can be done to articulate the front of that building further. And I understand all of the ramifications of the costs and the structural components. I
Okay.
still have my opinion.
That's fine.
Would anyone like to make a motion? Okay. I move to continue this project indefinitely to the staff hearing officer and to the consent with the following comments. The board is generally in support of the project. given its matching of existing details and the siting of the second story to a confined portion of the plan. The board appreciates conversations with the neighbor, and some of the board encourages a study of the south. One board member, well, I do too, so some, okay. Of the, thanks, two, okay, to number. Okay, okay, that's fair. Two board members would like to see the art detailing on the south elevation and encourage further articulation of the details. The board appreciates the slight setback of the second story.
I can second that, and I also want to clarify that I agree with the comment that the front elevation can use articulation. I only wanted to bring out.
It doesn't need a setback.
It doesn't. In my opinion, the articulation can be achieved in a different way that might be easier than trying to step the second floor back that would affect the, this is not
You
part of the
agree with
motion,
this
by
as
the way.
well? Okay, then I think you can well, I'm not requesting the board want a further setback. That's not part of it. So just if you change that statement about two of the board members, just say the board. And if you don't mind reading that statement back as you have, we'll see if we want to refine it.
It was currently two board members would like to see the setback detailing on the south elevation and encourage further articulation on the details.
So you can scratch the setback. It's that we're looking for, so the board looks forward to seeing further articulation of the south elevation.
I agree.
Okay. All right.
And I second the motion.
Okay, we can take a roll call.
Okay, Chair Lewis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Sherry.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Perfect,
Thank you.
Okay, and it looks like we are right on time to be able to begin a tiny bit early for our last item, which is review after final approval. This is 1510 Santa Rosa, a proposal to demolish a detached 400 square foot two-car carport, construct a new 804 square foot basement, new detached 454 square foot two-car garage, and new 783 square foot accessory dwelling unit above garage. The project includes a new 350 square foot deck above the existing family room for the primary residence and the enclosure of a 33 square foot breezeway for new habitable space. The proposed total of 3,567 square feet on a 13,503 square foot lot is 86% of the maximum required floor to lot area ratio. This is review after final approval that's being requested to permit an as-built roof deck above the previously approved accessory dwelling unit. The project requires substantial conformance to the plans that received project design approval and final approval on March 28th, 2022.
Okay, and I will recuse myself for perceived conflict of interest as I live within 300 feet of the proposed project.
I thought you lived on the mesa.
That's what I thought. All right, thank you. Are there any other staff comments for this project before we begin?
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Just wanted to note quickly that since this roof deck is sited in the middle, kind of in the middle of the parcel, in the middle of the house, and it doesn't involve any major change of the structure's massing, size, scale, or architectural details, staff felt that this could potentially qualify for a review after final. Ultimately, it's the board's decision. But that's why we chose review after final instead of a revised PDA for this project.
All right, that's helpful. So, welcome. If you can make sure the microphone is on, if there's a light.
Yes, there's a light.
Perfect, I can't see it.
That's very
And if you can both state your name for the record and then walk us through the drawings and any changes that happened from the approved drawings, and if there were any final notes in the minutes, which I think are the first tab on there.
Okay, my name is Charlotte Hansen. I'm the homeowner.
My name's Kevin Hansen.
We are both property owners of the house. Can you tell me again, did you want me to mention something about the last minutes?
Just in case there was anything you wanted to reference on the previous minutes, those would be on your first tab. But if you just want to walk through what's changed, that would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll just move on to what we're proposing today. So, and let me see, because I'm a Mac person, not a PC person. So we're here to propose a revision to our current building permit to our house located on the Mesa. The project is almost fully completed, and we're here today to propose a new deck. So here you can see, if I put my cursor, okay, perfect. So we see the location of the deck here. I have to look at some of my notes. I'm not used to do a presentation. So the property has a flat roof. Let me just go down to some pictures and renderings. Okay, here we go. So these are some renderings. The property has a flat roof throughout. Adding a rooftop deck that you see right here and to the right was an idea that came up during the construction process. So originally we didn't think of it, but as we were building, we just had that brilliant idea that you guys love to talk about when it comes to roof deck. So the location of the rooftop deck, as Ted mentioned, is central to our 13,000 square foot lot. It's facing south, so this is the south. It's also the street, and where the ocean is one street past our street. So facing south, we do have a lot. These are renderings, obviously, but we do have a lot of trees, and I will show you some pictures afterwards, some actual pictures. A lot of canary palm island trees. Mexican fan palms, and yes, just a lot of trees. Now, let's go back to this. I like this. I can just maybe zoom in a little bit. How would that work? Right here. So it's hard to see on this rendering, but maybe I should pull up this site plan afterwards. The deck is also located at a minimum of 40 feet away from any neighbor's house, west, east, north. There's at least 40 feet from any neighbor's homes, which provides significant distance and privacy for all the neighbors. So to talk about the style of the house, even though that has been already approved previously and all, it has a Mediterranean style with so flat roof with parapet, white stucco finish, and railings. Our first idea when it came in nature of how to build this rooftop deck was in adding the spiral staircase to access to it. We had originally thought to just add, so if I go around the perimeter of the deck, we already have, that was already on the approved plan, a parapet that's 24 inches high from the roof, and in order to meet the 42 inches requirement, we would just have to add 18 inches of railing surrounding the perimeter of the deck. That idea that we still like, we decided to revise that idea after talking to a neighbor that's located on this. So this is not an adjoining neighbor technically, because so we have our driveway. Let me just pull that quickly so you can see better, and I will show you some aerial shot. So you have our driveway right here. There's another driveway from a flag lot right there, and then a neighbor on this side somewhere. We talked to them. It's a couple, so we did talk at length with the husband, who did not see any problem with it. He was just fine with the idea, and we talked multiple times to him. But his wife has mentioned that she was not opposed to the deck, but she was opposed to see some railings. So the side they would see is right here. And see how the parapet is elevated now on the plan. It was supposed to be railing, but again, we decided, in order to fulfill her request, that we can just elevate the parapet, and that way it kind of fulfill the purpose of adding privacy for them, for us as well, even though we're pretty far. But and then, so if I go back here, I like this plan better. So we would raise the parapet here in that privacy wall, and also on the north side. We would like to keep some railing here, kind of overlooking at our own house, and then obviously keeping some railing here, because that's the purpose of the deck, is kind of to see the view. We would not like to feel too enclosed. So that's for that. And then what else did I want to add? Obviously, to still talk about the concerns from the neighbor. As you guys know, a rooftop deck is only occasionally used. It's not heavily used usually. It's just whenever you have time, you go take a look and take a peek at the ocean view if you can, and So one other thing I want to point out on this sheet is some rooftop decks surrounding our home, but also our neighborhood. Those pictures were taken by one of our sons. We gave him an assignment to take pictures of all the top rooftop deck he could find. So he did find 17, I do have to say, but we did not want to fit them all on that sheet, so we just added a few. This one was just recently built. It's 2 houses over us. They did railings throughout and no privacy walls. This one was built a couple years ago, I think, or maybe even more, a little bit more. Also all railing. This one is our neighbor across the street from us, one house actually over. They have multiple decks, but this one is the highest one they have. This one is one street behind us, was just recently finished. They kind of did the same, they had the same idea that, the neighbor kind of pointed out. They did a privacy wall on one side and open railing on the other side. And this one is our back neighbor. They have a spiral staircase and their deck right there. These are on our north side. I think that's about it. I do want to tell the board that we did put a lot of thoughts before, changing our original building permit. We did put a lot of thought into how to make sure we will fulfill all the requirements, make sure we keep in mind the privacy for our neighbors, but also ours, obviously, and matching the architecture. So we just hope that you like our proposal, and I guess we are open for question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll start with public comment.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I have no slips for in-person public comment, so we will move on to virtual comment, and I do have hands raised for Heather Sturgeon, so we will allow Heather Sturgeon to speak, and you will have 2 minutes to talk, Heather.
Hello, it's not Heather. It's the neighbor of the adjacent property, Tatiana Nazarenko. My property is at 15110 Santa Rosa Avenue. The Hanses never ever discuss any additions and changing on the plans with me, even though my attorney David Fayna and I participated in the board's hearing that led to the project design approval on March 28, 2022. I strongly believe that both decks, one of them looked right into my backyard, and I send you the picture of this, deprive me of my privacy and inconsistent with the Neighborhood Preservation Ordinance findings, page 5D of the City of Santa Barbara Single Family Residence Design Guidelines. Even though it's further than 15 feet from property line, the specific characteristics of our two properties make the privacy impact very significant. So the second proposed deck will also make the ADU higher than it was discussed, the railing and permitted in 2022. And the height of the ADU right in front of my house has been a serious concern for me. So the proposed both roof decks are not sensitive to my property and is not compatible with the neighborhood because its size, bulk, and scale is not appropriate to site in the neighborhood. Again, I'm citing general required findings to compatibility. And this is particularly egregious to have these two roof decks. And I also want to add that Hanses totally ignore good neighborhood guidelines and tips, page 67N of the City of Santa Barbara Single Family Resident Design Guidelines while designing the aforementioned roof decks. I was not informed about this. I was not informed about any changes, and I wasn't invited to meet with the Hansens to discuss these changes. That's why I'm asking the board not to approve the changes to the originally approved proposal without roof decks. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also see a hand for Heather Sturgeon. Heather Sturgeon, are you going to make a comment?
Hello?
Yes, please. You will have 2
Hi.
minutes to speak, Ms. Sturgeon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Heather Sturgeon, as you know. My husband and I live next door at 1520 Santa Rosa, and this is absolutely going to destroy our privacy. There are photos attached to the letter I submitted to you this morning that clearly demonstrate this. The applicants already have a 350 square foot roof deck, and the hearing today is for an extra deck that takes away the only privacy that we have in order to give them more of something that they already have, and it's incredibly unfair. I know Charlotte mentioned that we spoke about this. Her interpretation of our conversation is completely different than mine. I believe that she never completely told me about what she's proposing here to you today. And if she had complied with the Good Neighbor Guidelines and met with us during their design stage, they would have understood how badly this is going to hurt us. The Single Family Design Board cannot make the required Neighborhood Preservation Ordinance finding, number 6 on page 5D of the Single Family Residence Design Guidelines, because there is substantial evidence in the record that the proposal does not implement 36.2.1, 36.2.2, and 36.2.3 of the Good Neighbor Guidelines. The board and the applicant cannot dismiss or deflect these arguments. And finally, I would like to make sure that the board is aware that there is an active code enforcement case open on the applicant's application you are hearing today. Somehow it was inadvertently closed. Celia Lennon, the code compliance officer for this case, has confirmed that it is still very much open on her desk. She was only just informed a few hours ago in an email sent from Sebastian Herricks that this hearing was taking place today.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comment. We did, on this particular item, receive several correspondence. one from Dr. Kevin Murphy, Ray and Cherie Ox, Chris and Cara Ciarapa, Tatiana Narazrinko, Melanie Freeman, and Heather Sturgeon. With that, I'll turn this back over to you, Chair Lewis.
Thank you. We will start with questions. Are there questions from the board?
Do you want me to start?
Sure, that'd be great.
There was a comment that one of the public speakers made. One of the neighbors said about staff noticing. Wouldn't a change that involved a rooftop deck been noticed to the neighbors? Even though you did review after final, because it's a new scope of work, like that adds height. What's the requirement?
Thank you, Board Member Sherry. There's no requirement in the municipal code to do a mailed notice for this project as it was proposed. A mailed notice would be required for an upper story addition. Since this is not considered an addition per code, then staff didn't find a mailed noticing trigger that applied.
I'd like to just go on record as saying that's probably something that we should change because it's a roof deck.
Yeah, a follow-up question for staff is, what is the process right now if someone wants to add just a roof deck? Does that go to SFDB?
Yes, one of the code sections triggers design review for decks that are on a second story or above. So it would go to SFDB for a design review, but it wouldn't necessarily require a mailed notice.
Okay.
The design review triggers and mailed noticing triggers are separate in the code. Not all projects that come before the SFDB require a mailed notice. I do believe this project did originally require a mailed notice, the original scope, but we don't have to. The only two hearings we have to notice are the first concept review and the project design approval hearing per code.
But the neighbors can get on a list for further noticing
Yes.
of anything that goes on. If they were concerned about anything, they could have gotten on a list and then they would have been noticed.
That's correct, Board Member Sherry. Members of the public can request to be listed as an interested party, and to do that, you would email the SFDB secretary.
Got it.
And I'm sorry if I may say, the neighbor did receive actually a notice. We were told that there would not be any public notice, but there was.
Okay.
The neighbor showed us their letters, so I'm not sure what
The neighbor I'm
happened.
speaking of said they did not get a notice, so I was just asking staff what the policy was. So you answered my question. So it sounds like some people did and some people didn't.
To be clear, staff did not produce a separate mailed notice for this hearing. There were mailed notices prepared for the project, the original project, and it could be that some neighbors received some agenda notifications that the project was going to be on today,
Okay.
instead of a mailed notice.
All right. So are there, you didn't talk about the existing roof deck. Is that the one centrally located? Because you said this new deck is going to look out over our house. That's the way you presented it. So I thought that this was just the only roof deck, the one you're proposing
But
now.
we have only one roof deck. I just want to make sure this is clear. The neighbors seem confused when they say we have multiple roof deck. We don't. So this one is a rooftop deck that's sitting on top of the ADU. This one, obviously, since it's not 3D, it's harder to tell, but this is a deck, just a deck on top of.
On your normal
It's a
second
roof
story.
deck.
Yeah.
It's above the first floor,
Well, it's
but
above
it's not above the
it was
second.
not considered, I mean, we were told that was not considered a rooftop deck because it's sitting at the same height of the ADU. So
But
whoever.
it's on a roof. It's over a roof.
Well, because yes, I mean, it's just we don't have a roof deck. I mean, it's a flat roof, so
Yeah, I
yes.
think
No, it's all right.
if you
I
zoom
understand.
into
Do you want to
to
see some
photo
elevation?
one,
Photo one?
right
This
here,
one?
I think that's.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah, this one speaks better. You're right. Let me
That
zoom.
was one of my questions also,
Yes.
is I'm having a little hard time getting
I kn-
oriented on this. Just
So this is the main residence down here, and you go up to the ADU, and there is a deck right there.
a roof deck.
Well, yes, I would. That's the thing. It's a roof deck, I guess. We never call that a roof deck, but I'm Sure. But then this is the ADU, and that would be the real roof.
And it's one level higher?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Than the other one.
That
Yes.
helps. And then maybe it would help other members. Am I the only one that's having a hard time with orientation on this one?
No, I am too. And
got it?
what
It's on
is
it,
the
but
square?
that's okay.
Yeah, but you have the plans. I need to start bringing
Oh,
it up.
yeah, I
So
can look on
do
here.
you want to see some elevation? Maybe that would help.
yeah, actually,
or-
first-
Actually, the aerial shots. that you
aerial.
have on
I was
the
gonna ask for the
second
aerial.
Tab up at the top.
This one?
No,
No, at the tab in the middle that says number 4.
Number
You have 4
4.
PDFs open. The other-
Yes.
No, at
Oh,
the
the
very
aerial.
top.
Okay.
Please, Steph, thank you.
Okay. So this one?
That one. So you got 4 tabs open.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, perfect. Okay.
So
I wasn't sure you guys had
your
time to
house
include
is
this.
in the lower
We don't receive
right-hand.
these.
So this is our house. Then here, right here where I put my cursor, this is where the ADU is located. And the roof top deck is right here, just on a small part of the ADU roof. And then let's see, I know we took a few aerial shots, so it could be confusing. So which one would be better for you to?
I think
So
that's helpful, but if you keep
it's-
going,
it's
let's see
helpful.
what other photos are
So
part of
we
this.
have this one here from the north side. If I could mention, the first neighbor who spoke, she lives right here, and the rooftop deck is right here. So we have
She's looking at your north elevation, correct?
yes,
So can we look at the north elevation again?
yeah. So I go back.
Real quick though, what's the last page of this aerial shot? We didn't get this PDF,
yeah, go
so
ahead.
that would
There's
be
nothing.
Oh, there's nothing. Okay. Okay. So
What did you want to see? I'm sorry.
The north
Elevation.
elevation, which is what that neighbor is looking at.
it'll be on your last tab.
This
There
one?
you go.
Thank you. So elevations.
On page 5.
Okay, so north elevation, yeah, so that would be this one. So the neighbor is right here. And this is a great picture. This was taken at the end of our driveway. I mean, not quite. And that's, the neighbor is behind this structure here. And the rooftop deck would be right here where my cursor is, and does not even pass this window here. So we have this whole area here with just roof.
Okay. And back to the aerial, if you could just go to the
Yes,
top.
I will, yes. This one?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm looking at that roof deck. It's not,
Would be right here.
it might be, what's the distance from that roof deck to the property line? There's a driveway there.
So yes, it's our
What's the
driveway.
distance from the roof deck to the property line on the
On our
west?
property line?
Yes.
Yes, 22 feet.
22 feet.
Yeah.
And.
At the
um,
closest, the
the
furthest is
close-
25 and a half feet.
Yes.
Okay, 22 to 25 feet. And
And then
over to the north, where's that roof?
If you go to your first page, that would be helpful, actually.
Yeah, that is-
You've
that's
got
a
a
bigger
site plot
aerial.
plan.
Yeah, that's- yeah.
And that shows you how far back. There you go. If you zoom into that left one.
Okay. So here, so we have the north neighbor right here.
Yeah, I
The
understand
deck is
now.
right here. And then the west, we have our driveway. There is a flag lot here, so the neighbor's house is somewhere right
I saw
here.
that.
And then the second neighbor who spoke would be one house over on this side. And the property to their house, it's about almost 50 feet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No more questions.
One question. So right now, you've raised and done a solid wall at the two portions of the roof deck that face neighbors. Was there any consideration on making that taller than 42 inches for actual privacy?
So by the way, the deck is not facing the neighbor. It's really facing south.
The two elevations that face them. So, the two portions that don't have iron railings.
Yeah.
Are there? Are you opposed to bringing that height up anymore?
Well, not necessarily. not necessarily. We briefly thought about it, but we just didn't want to add too much height, and the architecture of it could be kind of compromised if we were to go much higher. I think the neighbor was talking about maybe an eyesore. I mean, we're not opposed to it, but architecturally, I don't think it would do any good to the house. But if that helped adding privacy, we could raise it, I guess.
The other thing, right now, it looks like 42 inches at the taller pieces, but then it kind of comes down. The dimension's not listed there. So is the idea actually that
Yes, 42 inches to the lowest point.
the lowest?
Yes.
So the drawing is off a little bit. If you go to your proposed south elevation, I'm looking at those dimensions on page, my page isn't, 5. So if you go down a page.
This
and-
one?
Yeah, zoom into that bottom elevation.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So the 42
Okay.
inches right now is drawn to that top side, but
And
really
then
the
we-
42
yeah.
should be to the lower
Okay.
slope, correct?
Yes, I see what you're saying,
Okay.
yes. Hmm.
Okay.
And we can easily, yes, make sure this is correct. The 42 inches would be to the lowest part of the parapet,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Those are my questions. Any questions, Board Member Anderson?
So the existing one-story roof deck, how many square feet is that? And do you know the square footage now
I
of
believe
what you're?
it's 341,
Okay, 341, and then you're proposing another
273.
273. Okay, 273, and we don't really, I mean, the guidelines say to just minimize the number of roof decks, but
The
we
one
don't give
thing I will point out about the one down here is it doesn't sit at a level that you're looking towards the beach side. It's more like a patio outside
It's more of a
the
landing.
ADU, just to.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it doesn't really have any view.
Okay, and the color of the spiral stair?
Would be matching the existing railings that everything would be matching. Yeah, so it's kind of
It's gonna be black.
dark gray. It looks
Instead of white.
black, but it's kind of a dark gray. They call it black tie. Yes, color.
Okay.
I guess it's black if it's black tie.
It's a little grayish.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and we got the height is 23 feet, but
Yeah.
might be a little bit higher with the 42 inch.
Yeah.
We'll move to comments.
I read through the Good Neighbor Guidelines, and I think that you've done a really good job at keeping this minimal and keeping it away from neighbors. You've done about as much as you can do to keep it as far away as you can from the neighbors, and you don't want to see them any more than they want to see you. And you've oriented your only open railing is toward the ocean. So when you're sitting there, you're not going to be facing the wall behind you or looking at them at all. And like you said, you're not up there all the time, and it's not big enough to have a big party, nor would you ever have a big party. So and I think I like the detailing of the roof and how you've done it. And I think this is a good example of an appropriate roof deck.
I agree. I've read through these comments, and it's mixed, and I think you've obviously talked with your neighbors, and it's hard to make everybody happy, but especially in this neighborhood, roof decks are very common, and I think your photos show that as well, that they're usually poorly executed, and I agree that by creating those solid walls, I don't want them to become so tall that you really block the view, but I think, the neighbor in the back, it's so far back from them. And then I agree that the neighbor to the side, you've got 2 driveways worth and a solid surface. So I think that that's a very reasonable amount of space, especially considering our guidelines and their recommendations. It exceeds that. And I know there are comments about 2 roof decks, but because the other one is oriented towards your inner patio, I really don't see them as two roof decks and that you've got this giant amount of space. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't feel that way.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so my only kind of question to the board is whether we want to raise up any more, but I think that it's quite modest on this side and still kind of provides it at the 42 inches, and then it'll get a little taller in the corners. Those are my comments.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, right. I agree, and I mean, with the two driveways, there's enough separation, and it's the same detailing. So, yeah, I agree with the other members.
And I think staff's assessment is right, that there's no change to the size, bulk, and scale, which is our main concern here for our board, at least. And as far as privacy, it does meet all the requirements that are encouraged to us for the guidelines. So would anyone like to make a motion? Or I guess.
I'll make a motion.
Staff, do you have any direction on the motion real quick?
Thanks,
We're
Board.
moving.
Thanks, Chair Lewis. Just a quick one. If in the motion you could specify, if you could be clear that the roof deck or the review after final request as proposed does substantially conform to the plans that receive PDA or does not substantially conform, whichever way you vote. Just make sure that language is in the motion. Thank you.
I'll make a motion for final approval that the proposed roof deck is within substantial conformance to the mass, bulk, and scale of the approved project, and that the applicant, the second item would be that the applicant has located the roof deck beyond the minimum 15-foot guideline for privacy, and has oriented the only open railing toward the ocean away from the neighbors, thereby providing a significant amount of I don't know, privacy.
Architectural privacy.
Or has provided privacy to the furthest extent possible for the roof deck.
Second.
And Board Member Sherry, just one point of clarification. You said final approval. I think you meant review after final. Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we will take a vote. Chair Lewis?
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti? Oh, I'm sorry, she's recused herself. Board Member Sherry?
Yes.
Motion passes.
You seconded.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to mention there is, this is an appealable action since it is a review after final. That's a discretionary action. So the decision can be appealed to the Planning Commission. The instructions are on the screen, and to the applicant, if we don't receive anything, any request for appeal within 10 days, you can go ahead and submit to the building permit application after that 10 days.
That is the end of our Single Family Design Board meeting for April 22nd. My microphone was not on, but thank you.